Here we have an image from an event, and it just needs a little bit of attention to make it look lots better. One of the first things we can see is that the bottles aren't vertical, they're leaning towards the left, so that might make some people feel a little seasick. We can see there's a blue bottle in mid-flight, so we can get rid of that. And apart from just generally recomposing the composition so that our lovely chap here in the middle is slightly more towards the left of the composition. Apart from that, we've got some little bits of fluff or powdered milk or something that we need to get rid of, and also the eyes are just a little bit dark, so we'll lighten those up as well. Then of course we'll give it a sharpen and check the levels, the general brightness and darkness of the whole image. So first of all, let's start with leveling up the image and finalizing the composition. So we're going to select the image by using select all or Control A. There we've got the marching ants all the way around. Now to transform the selection that we've made, we need to use the transform tool, which can be found in the edit menu, and there we go, free transform or Control T for added speed. Right, so now you can see the handles have appeared on the marching ants. Now if we pull one of these handles, there's a risk of distortion. Let's try it the other way. So the best way to keep an exact proportion of the image, so nothing gets widened, nothing gets lengthened, is to use the handle on the corner, just there. Okay. And what you can also see is that the cursor, when placed outside but close to the selection, has turned into a double-pointed bendy arrow. That means as soon as we click down the mouse button, we will be, and hold it, we can then rotate the image as far as we want to. Now all we want to do is make those bottles look like that upright. So I think there will suit. I've finished with that operation. So I've just released the mouse button. Now we need to get rid of these little gaps here now that we've rotated it. So we can do that by using the diagonal handles and stretching the image slightly. Because we're only stretching it a little bit, it's not going to do too much harm to the quality of the number of pixels that are being stretched. So that's acceptable, we'll go for that. So to make sure that that corner handle there keeps the picture in proportion, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and then click on the handle to start the stretch. And I'm going to come down here and try this one. And we've got rid of all our white bits, but we could do with, I'd still like the chap a little more to the left, and one way to do that will be to pull the top left hand corner. So I've just done a Control and minus to zoom out a little bit so I can see that handle. And now I'm going to pull that over a little bit, as far as I can. Don't want his head completely touching the top. There, to my mind that makes a much nicer composition. He's almost on the rule of thirds, so that makes a more acceptable composition than the original. So to keep that selection and all those moves in place, I'm now going to click the check mark there, the tick, and that will now be kept as an alteration to the image. So the next move is, let's zoom in on this fly and let's get rid of the fly, and we are going to use the patch tool, which is this one here. It looks like a patch, and that's literally what it does. Very quick and convenient for easy fixes like this one. So let's zoom in. That's using Control and plus, and again, and again, and again. Now we need to move the picture along, so we'll hold down the space key. See, the little hand has appeared, and now I'm going to press down the mouse button and drag. So I'm just going to drag the image over, so now I can see the fly. As soon as I let go of the space bar, we are back to a normal pointer. So let's pick up the patch tool. So I'm going to click on the patch tool, and those two arrows means that the image is still selected. So I'm going to do a Control D to make sure that there's nothing else selected on the image. And now what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the mouse button and draw around a lasso around the fly. Now the background behind the fly, there's lots of background that's similar. So all we've got to do once we've selected it, is then click within the circle, within the lasso, and then drag it to a spot close by, and we can see what's going to happen as soon as we release the mouse button now, and we can see the fly has disappeared. And if we do Control D, then the lasso will disappear with deselecting with Control D. And there we have it. So we've straightened the image, we've improved the composition, and we've got rid of the fly. So let's get back to the starting point. Okay, right, now then, these white spots on this chap's, these bits of fluff on the guy's sweatshirt. There's a big one there. We can get rid of that by using the patch tool in the same way. Oops, a little bit wonky there. Just lasso it, drag it, job done. That was a big one. Now we've got quite a few. It could take quite a while to individually lasso all these little spots. We can do a little area at a time. We've lassoed that whole area there, and let's see if we can match it up to a similar area. And yes, we've got away with that. So let's do another one. That's just on the fold. There's a bit of a shadow on the right hand side. Let's got away with that. We've just got a little bit of pixel overflow there. That's what happens when the surrounding pixels just have a little bit of crossover. So let's do another one there. That's a big one. Any more largish ones? They're all about the same size now. Let's get rid of that one. So let's zoom out again and see how we are doing. Oh, there's a big one on the lace there. Let's get rid of that one. It looks quite prominent. That one just there. So here when I lasso that spot, I'm giving a generous amount of area with which Photoshop can match up and play with the neighbouring pixels to make a decent patch. Just seem to have a little bit eaten out just there, so I'll just try that again a little bit further down. There we go, and I don't think a blind man on a galloping horse is going to complain of that. So how do we get rid of the rest of these small flecks? Right, well, one way is to use a filter called the Dust and Scratches filter. But at first we've got to select the area that we want to modify, improve. So let's use the lasso tool. Now we've got a feather here of 35 pixels. I'm going to make that 50, just to make sure we've got a soft edge around our selection. It's all going to be navy blue, so it shouldn't be too difficult for things, for Photoshop to match pixels with their neighbouring pixels to help us get rid of these white spots. So there we've got a lasso, and we've got a feather on that, a soft line, which we can't see at the moment, but it's there. And then if we go into filters, we have, if we go down to noise, this is where the Dust and Scratches filter is. And you can see already with the settings that were already in there, so 7 pixels, radius 7 pixels, and threshold 14, we can see that on the preview, on the live image, it looks like they've all disappeared. Now sometimes it will leave what we call artifacts, so those of us who are pixel peepers and look at images right at pixel level will know that this filter has been used. Sometimes there are some, now then, is that the bottom of the logo badge? Yes, I think it is. Ah, there we go. So as soon as I've stopped moving it, grabbing it and moving it, we can see that it's not quite a perfect match. Let's see what happens if we alter the threshold. So taking the threshold down a bit, to 4 levels, let's try it on 3 levels. But you can also see here on the live preview that it has smudged the information in the logo. So you've got to be very careful how you decide to use this filter, but it can be a good quick fix. So anyway, I'm going to take this down to get rid of the white spots, because there's another little trick we can use to restore the logo. Okay, so I'm now going to click OK, and we now have a spot-free sweatshirt. Is that of course some of the sharpness has been removed by the action of Photoshop smudging the pixels a little bit to get rid of those white spots for us. So let's deselect so that we've removed the selection. So that's Ctrl D to deselect. And because we had a feather on that selection, we can only by looking very closely can we see there's a slightly different texture in the pixels here compared to the pixels here. Let's zoom in a bit more closely. There we can see we've got more texture information, and there of course it's been kind of blurred slightly to get rid of those white spots. Now then, I said there was a neat little trick to get this logo back to where it was, and what we need for that is the history tool, the history brush, which is just here. So I'm going to activate the history brush, and that's what these boxes are here for. So I want to use the history brush to take this area back to where it was before we used the dust and scratches filter. So I'm going to click there, and there you can see the history brush. So wherever I use the history brush now is going to take that part of the image back to the stage before the dust and scratches filter was used. So we've got on this brush, on the history brush, the size is fine, 125 pixels, and the opacity, I think we can probably go straight to 100, save messing about. And what I'm going to do now is zoom in so I can see more easily what I'm working with. So I've used the space bar to drag around the image to get to where I want to be, and as soon as I use the mouse button and wander around with the brush, we can see the original information coming back on that logo. So we've still got rid of the white spots, and we've done a quick fix on returning the logo back to where it was. There we go. And there you can see those are the number of times I've pressed the mouse button to use the history brush to go back to that state there. So let's zoom out again, so that's Control and the minus key, and we're looking good. So we've straightened it up, we've improved the general composition, we've removed the white spots, we've removed the fly, and all that's left to do now really is to lighten those eyes a little bit, as usual with overcast lighting. The light falls on the top of the head, and deep set eyes, and often just under the nose and in these cheek areas here is where we get unflattering shadows. We see them all the time, so we don't realise that they are actually unflattering, but watch the difference as we make the changes. So let's zoom in again so that we can see what we're doing. Space bar to grab and move the picture to where I want to be, the bit I want to work on. Now I want the lasso again, because I just want to select the area of the eyes to lighten. I don't want to lighten his whole face. So we're on the lasso tool. Now this is a smaller area, so I'm going to have a smaller feather. So I'm going to make it 30 pixels. Okay, and so now I'm going to highlight, make a lasso around the eyes. There we go. And as you can see, I've got add to selection option on the lasso tool. That means I can put 2, 3 or as many lassos as I feel I want. So I want to do all the lightning in the same move. So there we go. Let's just lighten this up a little bit. It reduces the contours on the face and it just gives a more flattering impression. So what I'm going to use now is the levels tool, which is in image adjustments, levels, or Control L for speed. So let's just drag that control box up. So this histogram is simply a map of all the pixels that I have selected here in these 3 selected areas, these 3 lassos. And all I want to do is just lighten them a little bit. So I'm going to take the middle tones, the mid-tones, and let's take it up about 15. That looks okay. Can we take it up any lighter? Just a tad to 120. And I think that just about does the trick. So I'm going to click on OK. I'm going to remove the lassos, so that's Control D. And now if we want to see the difference between the two states, how much have we improved the picture? This is a good way to check. So I'm going back on the history palette. So if I click there, it shows the image before we did the levels, and this is after the levels. And if we zoom out to look at the overall image, then he's looking just a little bit younger, a little bit more awake. There we go. So that is a flattering, easy fix to make somebody look not just younger, but actually as they ought to look, just because of overhead lighting, which they can't control. So there we go. So what we need to do now is an overall sharpen. It's a sharp image where the focus is. So the focus was on the face, and we can see we've got detail in the hairs and texture on the eyebrows and in the beard. There was nothing wrong with focusing, no camera shake, no motion blur, but we're going to refine that sharpness using a Photoshop tool called Unsharp Mask. And again, that is in the filter menu, drop down menu, and we're going to sharpen. And it may sound illogical if you use this for the first time, but it's called Unsharp Mask, and yet we're actually going to sharpen the whole image. So click on the Unsharp Mask, and what we need to set these two is, and once they're set, they're normally set like that. Somebody's been messing about with this lot. So the amount needs to be 50%. The radius needs to be 2, and the threshold needs to be 0. So now we're going to click OK, and to see how much has been sharpened, we'll just click back to the previous history state, and there's just that tiny difference, just making things that little sharper in the detail that makes for an overall more professional image. So just zooming out again. I think the final finishing touch to this will be a vignette, just to emphasize the character in the shot. And to create a vignette, what we use again is the lasso tool, but this time we want a very wide, soft feather on it. So I'm going to go for 250 pixels. And just want a small amount of vignette, don't need a harsh one. And although my line is wobbly, as soon as I connect it up, it'll smooth itself out because it's got, that line is actually 250 pixels wide. Now at the moment, the part that's selected is the area inside the lasso. And what we want to do is just darken ever so slightly the area outside of the lasso. So what we do now is we use an option called inverse. So we've got our feather ready to inverse the selection, and to select this area we go to select and use the inverse command, or Shift Control I, click on that, and now you can see that this area is selected. This is the positive area that's going to be modified. And we're going to darken this a little bit with levels, again using the levels command. So in image, adjustments, levels, again what we've got in the selection is mainly midtones, so we're going to take the midtones and just darken them ever so slightly. So we've gone to 88 there, from 1 to 0.88. Click OK. And now we do Ctrl D to deselect and to check the effect of what we've just done, the before and after. We go to Unsharp Mask and then back to our finishing state, and there's just that hint of a darker surround highlighting our chap in the middle. So there we have it, one finished image. So all we need to do now is File, Save As, there's the file name, and when I finish the file I'll put an F after it to signify that it's finished. We'll press enter. And when the image options come up, this is going to be the master file, the master finished file, so I'm going to save it at maximum quality 12, the biggest file with every bit of information, the biggest file with all the information, and then click on OK. And the job is done. So just to go back to our starting point, this was the original, and now it looks like that. That's an improvement, and that looks much more like a professional image. Job done.